Hello, this is Ralph, and in this video I'm going to discuss the differences between being employed, being self-employed, and being an entrepreneur. Now, when you're employed, when you are working for somebody else, you are in a position where your job owns you. You agree with an employer that you are going to trade your time for their money. And you usually, in the best case scenario, you trade away 40 hours of your time each and every week, and then on Friday you get a paycheck, and then you can go out, enjoy the weekend, and then come back on Monday, sober up, come back on Monday, and then start the whole process all over again. And it's generally seen as a safe way to earn money. A lot of times people who are, trying out new things, new businesses, first getting into an entrepreneurial type of lifestyle, a lot of people might shout out at them, hey, why don't you get a real job? Why don't you give up this entrepreneurial gig and find a real job and settle down? That's because usually being employed and having a job, or having your job own you, is seen as the safer alternative, the less risky alternative. Because when you think about it, if you're working for a company and that company goes bankrupt and you find yourself out of a job, your employer just says, hey, sorry, you've been great, but gotta let you go. We're closing the doors here, and best of luck. Then what you can do is, you just pound the pavement, or search the internet. And the old-fashioned days, we used to actually read the want ads in the newspaper, and find yourself another job and find yourself another company, and then stay with that company for as long as you can until that company goes bankrupt, and then just repeat the process. So it's usually seen as a fairly safe way to earn a living, is by, being an employee and trading your time for somebody else's money. The downside with that is that your own personal liberty, you're trading that away. You don't have a whole lot of independence. If you decide you don't like what you do, you don't have to keep on doing it, but you're not going to get paid for it either. And if you decide that, you want to take off a couple of days for some reason, usually employers don't like to hear that unless they know well enough in advance, and then they can schedule you for some time off. But you can't just pick up and do whatever you want to. You have to be at a certain place at a certain time and be doing a certain job for a certain length of time, and you're going to be trading away a certain amount of your hours, and be gaining a certain amount of dollars in exchange. And yeah, your own personal liberty is you're trading that away. You are in a position where your job and your employer pretty much owns you, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, thinking about a traditional 9 to 5, 40-hour a week job. Now, being self-employed, you're in a little different position. You're still doing the work. You're still working hard for your living, and most people find that they can earn more money being self-employed if they're doing it right. But and they're in a position where their job doesn't own them; they own their job, and that's a nicer position to be in. When I made the transition from being an employee to being self-employed, I mean, I felt like I had a tremendous amount of liberty. I also, though, had a tremendous amount of responsibility. I couldn't rely on my employer to find work for me and to tell me to do the work. I had to go out there, drum up customers, find the clients, organize the jobs, get the jobs scheduled, and then go out there and do the job. So, I was the main worker, I was the labor, I was management. You had to wear all kinds of different hats. But, the upside of that is that you do have your own independence, your own liberty, and you are in a position where you own your job and the job doesn't own you, but you still have to work it. Now, an entrepreneur, now when I made the jump from being self-employed to being an entrepreneur, and I'm going to use the definition here from dictionary.com, is a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business. So self-employed people do kind of take on some of the responsibilities of being an entrepreneur. And they do this usually with considerable initiative and risk. Now again, that can apply to self-employed people too. Now the secondary definition here is what sets the entrepreneur apart from the person who is self-employed. An entrepreneur can also be an employer of productive labor. Now, people who are self-employed, and I was in this boat, usually they want to minimize risk by being both management and labor, and they learn to depend upon themselves to organize, the clients, to organize the jobs, to organize the work schedule, and then they rely upon themselves to actually get out there and do the work as well. So self-employed people can fall into the trap of being both management and labor, thinking that they're cutting out the middleman, so to speak, or the middlewoman, and they're simplifying things by just doing everything yourself. And that's a common phrase that you still hear these days. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. And self-employed people, generally speaking, not all the times, but I know I've seen this in my own life and in my own family, come from a family that's pretty strong in the self-employment area. But yeah, you want to rely more on yourself and not so much on employees, because hiring employees can be seen as being risky. Sometimes you get employees that are dependable. A lot of times, though, you get employees that are not dependable. And so, yeah, you minimize that risk by just cutting out the employee and doing all the labor yourself. That is where a self-employed person differs from being an entrepreneur. The problem with being self-employed, and this is a problem that people generally kind of gloss over when they're trying to figure out, doing their risk assessments and figuring out, the risks in their business. The main problem I see in being self-employed is that if you get sick, if for some reason you have to take yourself out of the picture for a couple of days or a week, or if you're laid up for a month or more, if you're laid up and you're self-employed, your business is also laid up. You just have to shut down production. If you're both management and labor, and you're in a position where you can't do labor, and maybe you're finding it difficult to be a good manager as well because of your infirmity, then you just have to shut down business. An entrepreneur gets around this by taking the risk of hiring good people and, trying to figure out who a good person is as opposed to an undependable person. Yeah, that can be kind of iffy in and of itself. Sometimes you think you find good people and then they turn out to be not so dependable. And sometimes you think, okay, this person isn't going to be dependable, they're not going to work out very well, and then turns out that they're going to be, they turn out being one of your star employees. So it's not that easy to figure out who's going to be dependable and who's going to be a safe risk and who's not going to be a safe risk. So yeah, hiring employees is risky in and of itself, but it's also an asset as I see it, because when you get to a position where you have to take some downtime, when you're sick, if you've gone through the work and taken the risk of building up a good team, and you've hired good employees, or you've brought on good team members, good associates, and you have to take yourself out of the picture for a while, and you've got a good team and a good system and a good business all in place, then that business and those people and that system can work without you. You can't say that when you are self-employed. When you're self-employed, the main brick, the main rock that you're building on is you. And if for some reason you have to take that rock yourself out of the equation, everything else falls apart. And that's one thing in my own family. I found that when I was self-employed, I could not afford to take off any sick days. There were days that I did not feel like working, but I had to. And my brother and his wife, they've been doing janitorial work for large companies, and they've been doing that now for about, I think, 30 years, something like that. And yeah, they've been able to remain remarkably healthy for those 30 years or so. But the problem is, what happens if you fall down a flight of stairs and break a leg? What happens when you just can't go out there and work? What happens when you do have to take yourself out of the picture? If you've relied primarily on yourself and only on yourself as a self-employed person, then when you are no longer able to do the work, your living collapses all around you. Now, the strength of being an entrepreneur is that when you do find a way to take risk and to turn it into opportunity, to take problems and find solutions, and to find good people, good team members that are consistent, reliable, and folks that you can trust, and you get them either working for you as laborers, or you'll bring them into your system, into your business as team members, as team players, then you're building up a system that you can take yourself away from for any length of time. And as long as you've got good people in good places, in good positions, and those good people continue to do, fulfill their function, to do their work, to keep the business and the system going, then, you have a system that you don't have to work every day to support. That system, that business, can actually start to support you without you being in there every day like a lion tamer, trying to say, hey, do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, and doing most of the work yourself and bossing everybody else around. That's not really how it works in the entrepreneurial circles, at least not from my perspective. An entrepreneur has got to be a business person. They've a good business person or a bad business person who's willing to learn how to become better, and a person who is good at risk management, who is willing to take risk and not run from risk, not try to minimize the risk by doing everything yourself. Then you're not, in my opinion anyway, you're not really an entrepreneur. You're more of a self-employed person. But yeah, you're willing to take the risk to build up that business, to hire good people, to do the work that needs to be done, to evaluate, who good people are and who good team members might be, and then, yeah, bring in those good people, either as laborers, employees, or team members, and then once you get your business built up, you got your system operating, you got the people in the system operating, then you can get to a point where the whole thing can pretty well manage itself. And if it can't, if you need to step in as a manager, you can do that. And in my own experience, I can, even if I'm laid up for a little while, I can usually manage things from the corner of my bed, if need be, from my laptop or desktop or whatever. It's kind of hard to be out there mowing lawn when you're sitting on the edge of your bed or you can't get out of bed. That's not a good position to be in. But if you're a good entrepreneur and you're good at collecting and building, not collecting, but building a good team and building up good team members, then yeah, your business can pretty well run itself with minimal input from you. You still have to be there to kind of see how things are going, encourage people, make sure the business is operating well and legally and all that. But yeah, you don't have to be out there doing everything yourself. So that, in a rather long nutshell, is the difference, as I see it, between being employed, being self-employed, and being an entrepreneur. Being employed, your job owns you. Being self-employed, you own your job. Being an entrepreneur, you own a business or a business system or a wealth generating system, and that system, after you build it up, eventually will get to the point where it will work for you and you're no longer working for it. And so, entrepreneur, that's the stage, at least in my books, that you really want to shoot for. It's assuming risk, because when you get into any kind of an entrepreneurial enterprise, there is no guarantee of success. If you want some guarantee of success, go out there and find a job. But an entrepreneur is willing to take that risk, manage that risk, take problems, find solutions, and get things done. And so that's the big difference between being an entrepreneur and being employed and being self-employed. So I hope you found some value in this video. I'm going to leave it at that. This is Ralph signing out, and we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for dropping by.